Matt Krieger.
Becky Soglin.
Ingram.
Megan Hill.
Eric Tate.
Daniel Bissell.
Jesse Leckman.
Casey Hutchinson.
And Sarah Gardner.
Right. I guess if everyone's seen copies of the September 13th minutes, which was mostly the presentation by the marketing consultants, and you approve of those minutes, we can go ahead and put those in officially. Any objections or?
I move to accept the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Somebody? Becky Sogling seconding that motion. Then the next thing, I guess, is any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda? Do we have anyone here from the public today? Move on from that. Let's move, I guess, from there to staff announcements. So Sarah and Rachel.
So the first item on the staff announcements was action items from the last meeting. And as you may have noted in the minutes, there were no actionable items, although we did encourage everyone to attend Climate Fest, and we're delighted to see many of you there. So thank you for that.
Sort of.
Some more on time than others.
I came late. I forgot about it. So I came like in the last 10 minutes.
Oh, no.
For my
But-
shift.
But made a very valuable contribution.
That's right. That's right.
The next item then is the climate action and outreach updates. And we sent an attachment for this in your agenda packet. The first item on that, of course, was Climate Fest, which we felt to be very successful this year. We had solid attendance at all the events. I think the highest attended event was likely the mural painting, which people seem to really enjoy. We had, it looks like over 120 volunteers from the community who signed up to help paint that mural. We got very good press coverage, including articles in the Press Citizen, the Daily Iowan. We had 2 segments in a news feed from KWWL, and were included in Senator Hoag's newsletter. And actually, I was quite delighted to open my my Sunday paper and find that someone had spontaneously written a letter to the editor in praise of Climate Fest. So that was exciting. I just brought it in because it mentions things that Wendy Ford had worked on, so I wanted to pass it on to her. Always nice to have the hard copy. And then we had many stories gathered, I think just under 40 stories gathered from different members of the community in our storytelling booth. And I noted on here that the stories were being cleaned and compiled. We actually just this morning received a sort of rough cut of the video that we hope to release later, looking at those stories. So what I'm going to do is pull that up so that you can be the first to see it, which is fun. But we actually have big plans for those stories, I'll say, beyond Climate Fest. Like one, it is a great way to engage the community at those events. So it has served that purpose. We hope to continue doing things like this when we're out at community events, in part because, as we've discussed many times, we know the thing that most persuades people to take climate action is to hear about how others are doing so, who are friends and neighbors. But also, as we're looking ahead to our website redesign, we'd like to really build a storytelling focus in on that. And so what this has given us is a lot of raw material to work with. So we hope to keep repackaging and reusing the material. As we used to say when I was a journalist, we hope to repaint that wagon several times. But let me pull up that video for you because it's really nice. And I'm pulling it up on Zoom so that those accessing it remotely can hear it as well.
I take climate action because I care about the planet, and I hope to still have a beautiful planet in the future for my children and my children's children.
I feel you have to take action for your climate, for your future generations, and here's our future generations right here, so you have to do your part and take responsibility for anything you can do.
We all need to. There's no question of why. We've gone past the time where there was a place where we could return back, but now it is imminent that we have to.
Well, it's critical that we
change our ways at this time because we simply can't continue. The recent issues have shown us this. The science shows us this. It's a critical issue today, right now.
I take climate action by being really cautious about my actions, whether that be the food that I eat, the packages that I buy, or how I get from place to place.
I ride my bike or walk to school because it lowers pollution.
Trying to promote habitat restoration and people planting native plants, people allowing some of their yard space to be a little bit more natural and wild.
Shopping for produce ethically at places like the farmers market.
If you eat meat, eat a little bit less meat. You know, even if you give up meat one day a week, that's something.
The old thing our Depression era parents said, you know, use it up, make do, or do without.
Every action possible to stop climate change is important. Insulating your house, riding your bike, it all adds up.
What gives me hope is the fact that we can impact future generations.
It's really hopeful for me because I just like to be positive because, well, we've done enough of all these bad things, right? So now people are starting to aware of that actually, which is really great. I mean, the new generations like coming up is also like really strong against, you know, fighting for the climate actions, right?
I'm really excited about the electric future. That's one of the things that gives me hope is seeing more and more people starting to drive electric vehicles.
Well, the Earth is very resilient, and people are very resilient. And sometimes in a time of like a dreadful disaster, we'll see suddenly people will get it. They'll be kind. They'll step out of their little rigid things, and they'll be good to other people. They'll share what they have. They'll work as a team to make success. And I think that the bell is ringing. And I hope that that spirit can be awakened.
Iowa City's just one of its strengths is the community and how easy it is to get plugged in and meet people and get other people excited about something. People want to take action. So it's an easier place than most to start organizing and make change.
It's good, but you don't need to hear it twice good. So we're really pleased with that. And I've been hearing in the last week from folks who would like to be involved in Climate Fest next year, including a food truck vendor, Rachel. So you can be excited about that. So I just wanted to pause there. I know that's a big event for us, and I want to make sure that if there are any questions about Climate Fest, we get them answered before moving on.
Maybe just thank you for all your hard work on that. I know you put a lot of, how much effort I think you put into that. So just round of applause for everyone who was involved. I thought it was great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciated the some of the sort of infographic material that was ready to go beforehand. Made it easier to share with students, and you know, especially younger folks, they don't want to read websites. Videos and infographics like that will be helpful.
Well, great. Thank you. We're looking forward to building on the successes next year. So then moving on, we'll just hit a few highlights here in the list. The marketing RFP, as you know, what is underway into phase 2. They actually, Cause Impacts presented 4 different brand strategy ideas and creative concepts to Shannon and I last weekend, Shannon being Shannon McMahon, our communications specialist here. So she and I are going over those and providing feedback, but there's some exciting early work being done, particularly around the mascot we hope to roll out. So that's fun. And then Green Iowa AmeriCorps, this was another one that I wanted to pause on. I feel like there are things that we work very hard on in the office, like Climate Fest, and it's easily recognizable how hard the work is. With Green Iowa AmeriCorps, I think the fruits are a little more subtle. So I just want to take a moment and put them a bit on the radar. We had our new team on board actually last week. I was working with them to get them trained. And I'm actually quite proud of our recruitment efforts, which we worked on quite hard over the summer, using the help of last year's AmeriCorps team and then tapping into some resources within our office as well. And as a result of that, as of last week, we were the only city in Iowa that had a full energy and community team in place and ready to go. On top of which, we set some goals for ourselves in terms of increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion on the team, and making it, I think, an important initiative, rolling it into our green jobs work that we're doing, and making sure that we're really recruiting members who come from the community and can be tapped in right away. And as a result of all those efforts, not only do we have a full team, but 3 members of our team identify as white, 2 identify as Black. 1 is connected with the local Islam community. He's very active with the local mosque. We have someone who is active with affordable housing and low-income initiatives here in the city. And we have members who range in age from 22 to 55. So it's an incredibly diverse team, and I think it's going to be much stronger. We have always been lucky to have strong teams, I would say, or we've had strong teams in the past, but I'm just really excited about what this team is bringing to the table. So some good work there. And thanks, Megan, for the work you and your team did to contribute to that.
Have you gotten a sense of what types of, what aspects of the recruitment process may have been most useful, successful towards those ends?
I think there are 2 things we did. One is very early on, we translated our recruitment materials so that we were reaching out to just a broader segment of the community. The other thing we did, we translated, I should say, into, I want to say Spanish, French, Arabic. Am I forgetting one?
Yeah, I think there are 2 more.
Yeah. So we translated, and then we followed up. I spent a lot of time reaching out to community-based organizations. Poor Eric knows I reached out to him about reaching out to his church. Just any way we could think of reaching out to community organizations and saying, you don't have to just be a recent college graduate. There are all kinds of ways to participate, and really highlighting what the benefits are. And I will say the other thing we did that I'm actually quite proud of, and thanks goes to Rachel for this, for helping us work with the budget to make it possible. Every AmeriCorps team of 5 that comes for the energy and community team, 2 members go through a BPI, a building professional certification, to do energy audits in homes. And we see that as a really important resume builder. A lot of the people who do come to the team may not know what an important skill set that is to have on their resume. They may not know going in that they're going to be very interested in doing energy audits. And so in some ways it can be a missed opportunity for the other 3 members of the team. What we did was reach out to the Green Iowa AmeriCorps coordinators at the state level and ask if it would be possible for Iowa City to pay for additional members of our team to get that certification. And as a result, 4 out of the 5 members of our team have been going through that training and will be certified in the next 2 weeks. So that is a green jobs credential that they will be able to put on their resume going forward. And I feel just really proud of the city for making that possible. Megan, you might better be able to speak to what a big deal that is.
Every single person that has had that certification with Green Iowa gets a job right away. So yeah, really awesome. I was unfortunate to not get it, but yeah, it's great. So thank you.
Yeah. Cool. And they are all set. We actually had over 30 people sign up for home energy audits during Climate Fest. So I know that the AmeriCorps team is busy scheduling those right now to get out into the community and start doing them. And the state gives them a goal of doing 150 audits over the course of the year. I have told them I would really like to see us go over and above that, especially since we took last year sort of off for COVID. So, and Danny will talk more about how we're going to roll them into our energy efficiency program in a minute. The others, I think, are fairly straightforward. We are getting ready to launch the second phase of our TIF-funded energy initiatives. We have funded 8 projects so far in the 3 districts we were initially working with. There's another one in the pipeline right now. If it gets approved, it will bring us to just under $1 million granted through that program. And Wendy Ford has begun looking at expanding it into the downtown district and the north side neighborhood, including that business district, which technically falls outside of the downtown TIF district. But here too, we've been working to find a way to tap into some additional funds to make it possible. And that actually stems in part for work done for Climate Fest, just to show how many of these little initiatives that are public engagement facing end up bearing other fruit. One of the things that Olivia, our communications assistant, and I did was actually hit the bricks downtown and walk through the north side commercial district and through the downtown, just reaching out to individual businesses, going door to door and asking if they'd like to participate in the map we were building of green initiatives among businesses downtown. And through that, we found that there were actually a number of business owners just north of downtown in the block where Oasis Falafel is, and those businesses who are very interested in climate action and energy efficiency programs, but technically are outside of the area that would have qualified. So thanks to that little bit of just old-fashioned walking and talking work, we were able to, I think, better refine that program for the future. So that's good.
Are you finding as part of that process, did you find that a lot of those businesses are also owner occupied?
No, which is one of the challenges. And Wendy can speak more to it, but one of the things we're building into it is, of course, getting the owner's consent. And we've talked about how better to interface with the landlords to make it possible for their business tenants to participate in those programs. There were 5 Climate Action at Work awardees recognized during Climate Fest. Hopefully you saw the video that went out. The Gross Solar Lynn and Johnson County program closed last week. As at the time of the writing of this update, we were very close to the milestone. Becky, do you know if we met the next milestone of building 500 kilowatts?
I may, but the information isn't really public yet.
All right, so we'll tentatively expect good news there, but it's good news already just in the kilowatt hour or kilowatt capacity that was already built through that program. The other talking point that came up that's not on this list is that this is, I believe, was it the 4th or the 5th year that that program's run?
It was the 5th year in the area, but the 3rd year in which Iowa City was able to participate.
There we go. Yeah. And of those 5 years, it was the 4th lowest performing in terms of enrollment, followed by or the previous year had also been a little low performing. In fact, I think we didn't even meet the 3rd milestone last year or
We met
goal.
the 3rd, but not
The
the
3rd,
4th.
not the 4th. Gotcha. So there has been some initial discussion among the entities involved in that about maybe pausing the program next year, on the sense that maybe one of the reasons it's under enrolling is that it's a victim of its own success, that it's been so successful in previous years. We may see a bit of market saturation at the moment, and it might make sense in terms of trying to meet those milestones in the future to pause and let a little demand build up before we do it again. So we don't know, but we'll keep you posted on that discussion.
What do you think, like, the program would look like? You bring it back and do the same thing as you've done, or just like you're shaking your head?
The amount of time that it takes for staff time, we would need to have a more significant outcome, I think.
Okay.
I think there's also some discussion about incorporating energy efficiency more fully into the program as
Rather
well.
than having it just be about solar. I mean,
Right.
something that's probably driving this year's declination for sure is the sunsetting of the state level tax credit. I mean, that's probably the less than saturation. And from what I hear, I mean, that going away makes the economics, 12 years or something more rather than what they were. I think that probably is a huge factor.
It's still there. It's actually over. Yep. The state credit is oversubscribed. So that was never part of the calculation when
you guys did
installer
this,
was
right?
showing the quotes, because they didn't want to obviously mislead anybody in any way. So it was only the federal tax credit. So in addition to that decreasing, there was also a loss. So the percentage of credit is much lower.
So some complexities worth evaluating
I
before
think we'll be
plunging
we'll
ahead.
probably if the group's interested, I can probably say more either next month or in 2 months, once we have the debrief with all the partners. There were about 15 partners altogether.
Yeah.
One interesting option is that there's a lot more uptake now of PPAs and then just like where they can affect that delta for energy costs. So you are putting nothing up front and you can get certain allocation on your roof up to your max energy usage or smaller, whatever it is, and then do your 20-year PPA. And instead of paying, say, 10 or 11 cents a kilowatt hour, they just take it down to 8. So you're paying less for your energy over the next 20 years, but you have no upfront cost. So you wouldn't get the sweetheart deal that you would have gotten 2 years ago, but that doesn't exist. And over time, someone reducing your bill by 20% is a great option. The question is, how does that work with the mortgage lien? And do people feel comfortable switching if you sell your house in between then? And it's just more explanation to the next homeowner, but no one, I feel like, would balk at getting cheaper energy. So that's, I think, the new way that, because a lot of installers can capitalize that up front with a PPA, and that's going to become more the trend than owning your own solar on your roof. So you might want to come back with that strategy too.
We've certainly seen it on the business side. It would be interesting to see how that applies at the residential scale, and also how it's affected or will be affected by the lower incentives also for the investors who hold that contract.
Right. And for me, I'm looking at doing one here in the fall just to see, and I'm talking to, different real estate agents and trying to figure out what it's going to do to my property value, if anything. And it seems like there's just upside. And so that once that's figured out, people feel comfortable, they're not going to have trouble selling their house because people are inheriting a contract and they understand that there's just value on their roof. Then I think that it'll work out pretty well. But that seems to me to be the way forward right now, unless some kind of a new federal bill passes with more tax credits, which is looking bleaker and bleaker.
The tax incentives at the state level aren't being funded any longer, but the state does still have the existing statute that for the first 5 years, the solar installations on your roof, it can't be counted into the property assessment for it. So you don't pay the increased property tax for the first 5 years. So I'd say get those solar panels on your roof now, Stratus, and sell your house in 4 years.
That's right.
All right, we'll just move quickly through the couple others then. We finally have, speaking of solar, the solar panels up on the Taylor Drive property, which is really exciting. And the Green Iowa AmeriCorps team is going to go over this week to do a blower door test just to practice over there, but also to get us some data on. Unfortunately, we don't have a baseline to compare it to, but it'll be interesting all the same to see what the daily air exchanges are now that we've done a number of things over at the house. So I'll report back to you on that. And then the EV Readiness Plan, we had our first quarterly working group meeting in August. And what we did is everybody from the reporting cities went out and took pictures of signage attached to their EV parking stalls. And we discovered that there is a lot of variety. I mean, it's very consistent if you're Tesla or if you're a mid-am installed site, but from city to city, there's great variation. So at the next meeting, we're going to talk about coming together with some recommended best practices for our city so that there's a little more regional coherence, making it easier for EV drivers to find those public stations. And I'm going to turn the next section over to Daniel to talk a little about the work he's been doing since getting hired on as our analyst.
Real quick, before we move on to that, on the EV Readiness Plan, so this was the first quarterly meeting you said, so is this sort of an ongoing, no end date initiative or, okay.
Yeah, I'd say so. And it's really nice. It's really an outgrowth of, I'd say, the very solid planning process that ICF initiated in creating that plan. Actually, I was talking to planning students over at the university today, and I was saying, I will take an ugly plan with a good planning process any day, because it's the planning process that really flows into implementation. And so one of the outcomes of that plan was that the regional planning group was so engaged. When the plan was completed, they were like, we really want to keep having these conversations and we want to keep all touching in as we're moving the plan forward. So yes, those regional plans are going to continue with no end date quarterly until I guess we're just saturated with EV charging stations.
It's good to me.
Good to hear. Yeah.
So that's the ICF is the Volkswagen settlement money, right?
ICF was the consulting firm we used that helped put together the plan.
The Volkswagen money that allowed for that?
I think actually it was through I don't think it was through the Volkswagen settlement money. I think it was American Recovery Act funds actually that paid for that, but I can double check.
So what happened? What did happen with the Volkswagen EV? That Brenda had been looking at getting to do the regional plan. That ever came through, or that?
I guess they just identified a different pot of money to use for it. My understanding is most of the Volkswagen money, if not all of it's actually going for physical infrastructure in the state of Iowa. So it would have gone for, it goes for charging stations and I think vehicle replacement in fleets. There's some funds there for it, but the planning funds came from somewhere else. All right, Daniel, take it away.
All right. So I won't go through the entire proposal. It was in the packet, but I'll hit the highlights of the.
Oh, 1 second. Here. Jumping ahead. So what we want to talk about is the section on reporting and analysis for the office update. Just basically, you're going to hear more about the energy efficiency update, but also some of the other analytical work that he's been doing.
Okay, sorry about that. So I recently updated our submission to CDP for the Global Covenant of Mayors report, and I believe that was accepted today, or confirmed that they did accept that.
Yeah, they have it, but we won't get our scores back for a couple months probably.
And then our public EV charging station usage has been analyzed. I've been working on that, on the usage and usage by location. The transportation department reached out to me on possible expansion of EV charging in the parking ramps. So I put that data together for them, breaking it down by location.
All right, we'll save the big news on energy efficiency for old business. The only other item then under staff announcements is that we are going to be walking in the UI homecoming parade. And maybe you are too. We're looking for volunteers to walk with us behind a climate action banner and hand out, I guess, candy and t-shirts. Is that right, Rachel?
Yep, that's what I know about.
Yeah. So if you too would like to walk in the homecoming parade, you can volunteer now, or you can reach out to us after the meeting and we would be happy to have you along with us. We're going to be reaching out to the climate ambassadors as well.
When is the parade?
The 15th?
Yep, October 15th. It's at 5:45 p.m. So
Friday, right?
Yep, Friday.
I may be able to make it. I have a meeting that goes up until 5-ish, and then I have to run across town. But
when are you guys, like, how early ahead of that are you guys staging?
That's the question.
Yeah, so staging we're going to have an electric vehicle in the parade. The mayor and city council requested it, so they'll be along. We're inviting city staff as well as you all and the climate ambassadors. I would imagine as long as you can get there no later than 5:30, that would be plenty of time before
You can't just jump in off the street.
You could do that too.
As long as you have a sunroof in the EV and I can be like popped out of the middle.
Fresh air.
Yeah, that's right.
The theme is moving tradition forward. So our communication staff felt like that is what our climate action office is doing.
Yeah, just let us know where to meet as part of that.
Sounds good. All right, and now we can move on to old business.
Okay, revisiting the energy efficiency rebate program. I'll go over the highlights here. As I'm sure you are all aware, from the latest greenhouse gas emissions inventory, 22% of community-wide emissions originate from residential sources. And the two largest consumers of energy in a residential setting are the HVAC and water heater. So we would like to implement a rebate program, helping to bring residents attic insulation up to R50 level, helping them to replace their water heater with an efficient hot water heater, either tankless or heat pump, depending on
what's appropriate to that home, duct sealing, and programmable thermostats. This program would be complementary to programs already offered by Mid-American Energy and a loan program offered by the Office of Community Development and with the City of Iowa City. To help with let's see, the equity of the distribution of this. We do want to heavily promote this in lower income neighborhoods and to look at the effectiveness of the program. We do want to require that any participant undergo a Green Iowa AmeriCorps home energy audit. And then we would look at their utility bills from a period 12 months before the project and 12 months after the completion of the project to look at how effective the project is.
So one question I had on in the packet when on the agenda, you had a breakdown of the potential, cost savings and upfront cost of each of these, but didn't have one for the air source heat pump. How much are so in the thing you mentioned at air source heat pumps as one of the efficiency measures, but I didn't see a breakdown in the chart. Did I miss it?
Air source heat pump is not one of the measures that we're proposing. We're looking at insulation, hot water heater, duct sealing, or programmable thermostat.
No, I know where the confusion may be is that for the hot water heaters, we're looking at heat pump water
Heat
heaters
pump,
as
okay,
well
that's
as
what I
tankless
misread.
water
Right,
heaters.
Okay, right. Never mind. Then that's correct. Then it makes sense.
A question I had, and I apologize if this was in the memo and I missed it or don't remember. Since these are higher efficiency pieces of equipment in the case of the operation of like the HVAC, are there estimates on what repair costs will be if the equipment's going to be higher quality, higher performing? Typically, that means there are more costs associated with either upkeep or repair. And I just wonder, is that something you can look at and make sure the households are prepared? It's like certain HVAC systems go from that every other month or every 3-month filter, which might cost you $20, to one that's replaced annually for maybe $150. Kind of throwing out numbers there, but I think I'm kind of close on some of that.
Sure. Yeah, repair costs are not something that we looked at, but we can.
And just so the households can be prepared, and that I need to give credit to an installer who I once talked to who said he was part of a program, I think it was a federal program, where they were installing various equipment, and that ended up being problematic down the road when there were repairs needed, and maybe they weren't even needed as in the aggregate. Maybe they pencil it out well, but if you needed an expensive repair out in one fell swoop, it was a challenge.
Yeah, I definitely understand that concern. So that's something we can look into.
Sarah, one question I had is, remember we talked about, and I know now that, that since I brought this up erroneously, it's not in the list of incentives, but air source heat pumps and trying to figure out how to get more, more knowledge embedded in the local installers who are, companies that might be doing that HVAC work, and that putting on some kind of a workshop where they buy lunch and bring them in and have someone talk through, like, because the common refrain is, that's great, but those things don't work in a cold climate. But you have in around Minneapolis, you have a lot of installers who do this really well and make it work for people, and trying to figure out like what's the total life cycle cost versus another one. What happens when you're getting that level of efficiency out of it? Do you need that backup for cold weather, et cetera? I just mentioned that casually. There's a Gazette interview I had to do like a month ago or something like that. And then I've gotten some calls or emails and they're like, oh, tell me more about air source heat pumps. And I don't actually know logistics of it other than knowing it's probably a good thing. And so trying to figure that out, I did send one person to you. I don't know if they followed up.
No, they haven't yet, but that's a good idea. You can send them to me and Daniel.
you
We
have
both
that
have air source heat pumps in our homes,
with a
as it
backup
turns out.
furnace.
Mine has a backup furnace, but only because it's an older unit, I realized.
So then it usually does not have a backup, and you don't freeze when the temperature goes below 30 degrees, right? So.
I don't know. I do have a backup furnace, so.
Oh, you do have a backup
Yes.
furnace. So that's the thing, right? Knowing like how that, but anyway, to
Right.
figure that part out, I think that that'd be a great way to give the incentives to the actual HVAC installers and help them to be more comfortable promoting if they know how it would work would help people.
So part of the reason air source heat pumps aren't included in this proposal currently is because we wanted to not create too much overlap between the existing energy efficiency loan program through Neighborhood Development Services, which does cover HVAC systems. And we thought what we could do as we're piloting this program is use it as an opportunity to start seeding the ground with contractors, exactly as you've described, Stratus, inviting them in to get some information, not just on how the systems work, but what the key selling points are so that they know how to talk to customers about them. And to that end, Daniel and I are going to be attending the Iowa Energy Efficiency Summit next month in Des Moines, in part because they're bringing in a speaker to talk about exactly this thing. And so we're hoping that we can convert or recruit him or her to come to Iowa City and sort of reprise that discussion with our contractors. So stay posted. We have some engagement ideas there that are in the works.
That's awesome. And just to be on the record, it was your idea. We were talking about it 2 or 3 months ago. You're the one that brought up the idea of going directly to installers. So just want to be clear that this is not my, this is Sarah saying this, and I'm just following up on it.
So I'm sorry, and I might have, can you clarify? So what's in this energy efficiency program and what stays in the other program?
So this program would only cover attic installation, an efficient hot water heater, duct sealing, and a programmable thermostat. I know there's been a lot of discussion about HVAC, but.
Okay, sorry, that was my mistake. The minute anyone starts talking about things, I'm like, yes, HVAC.
Right,
But,
right. Those are covered
so that
by
was-
both Mid-American programs and the Community Development Loan Program. So we didn't want to overlap with that.
And how does, I'm sorry, I've had a really long day. You've probably already said some of this, but so if someone needs one thing from one program and one from another, how easy is it for them or not? or do they have to apply? Do they manage both applications, or does somebody talk to them about both needs and funnel it through the 2 different places?
I can hop in if you'd like. I'm not on the video. Rachel Kilberg, Assistant City Manager. I think at this point, we haven't worked out the application process yet. We're still trying to just narrow down kind of the details of the program, but it would be very helpful for us as we move into the next phase of that. If you have any comments or suggestions, I think our goal, just talking internally, is to try to find some streamlined way that we can incorporate it into our existing community development rehab programs, because there's several beyond just their energy efficiency program as well that could be bundled with
That'd
our
be
rebate.
super. So it's, more basically treating the resident like a customer, and it's just a transparent approach for them, and the behind the scenes is wherever you're sending papers from one floor to another or whatever. So but thanks. No, it's really exciting, and thanks for all the hard work on it. I know to also coordinate it with the utility programs is a bonus, but also a challenge.
So we could, I guess, move on to old business. No, old
Well, I
business
have
to new business. Unless Eric has a
Question, yeah. So I see a couple sort of equity-minded parts in here, including sort of the sliding scale for the rebate, and looks like you're gonna be doing some tracking of where these are going in. So one thing that I keep coming to mind is like in thinking about applying an equity lens to some of these things that are done at the household level. And I don't know the answer to this. Should we be thinking more about, areas of town, like geographies, or like characteristics of individual households that are getting this, to better understand this? And so, when you say pilot project, it seems like these are ways to experiment with to what extent possible, like collecting all sorts of information and then maybe using it later as questions become more refined. Second is, and this may also have to do with like maybe informed by Green Core America, going back to this question about the business owners and their tenants, their owners, and the participation in these programs. To what extent do people that are landlords participate in this, or are we just seeking to get like regular, people that are living that are homeowners?
Landlords do participate once in a while, but not often. And I think that's a communication thing, because when you say energy audit, they probably think one thing. So it's somehow getting in, speaking to them and telling them what we can do, and also letting them know it's not going to cost them more money too.
Okay, so we may already have some communication related disparities for something that doesn't cost you anything. Here we're asking for investments that so that could be different, plus that it's a rebate instead of like a grant. So these are sort of like dimensions of this that might be useful to think about and collect data whenever possible.
Or even as part of you're doing post installation tracking of energy, part of that process could also, of that post-occupancy evaluation could also include like questions or a short survey about the program itself, potentially too, if that's not already been incorporated.
I'd be really curious to find out how these people learned about it. Like in this pilot, you're going back to people that have already participated somehow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you expand this, I just think like there's all sorts of, these are all great activities. But it's always in the back of my mind, like who can, who will take advantage of these resources.
Is there a way, for example, and I realize this, not to make it too complicated, maybe it's for after just an initial year of doing this and working out, just there's so many things I know you have to work out, but kind of along what Eric's, like if you looked at, say, who's having trouble paying their water bill, is that a strong indicator for somebody who their house may need some of these attributes more than another house, that the benefit from insulation, that their bill then is going to go down for heating. And there could be other parameters we were talking about in our building working group. When I was in planning school, we did a study for Dubuque called Green and Healthy Homes, so that they could prioritize how they were rolling out their program. And not, that was an exercise in some ways, and but we tried to find some proxies, because you can't always get, say, the electrical or utility data. If you can get some of that, then that's obviously a big additional key. I mean, you'll be looking at you'll be asking for that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes though, you need more than a year or two to see, right, the pattern, how challenging it is. But mm-hmm. Anyway, I'd be happy to talk with you guys more about that. And I don't know if there were more that came out of our discussion a couple of weeks ago.
There was, but I'm blanking on it at the moment. But yeah, some of those other
things that serve as a proxy for need in addition to just what a bill is.
I can speak a little, Eric, to the pair of questions you had about looking at neighborhoods versus looking at housing characteristics for outreach. We have been doing some preliminary thinking about this, and in fact, using AmeriCorps data. When the AmeriCorps team goes to do an energy audit, they collect several data points on every house they visit. And one of the things that we had the AmeriCorps team do this summer is I asked Megan's counterpart, Evie, to go through the full 5 years of data and pull out data points that could be used in analyzing the housing building characteristics, along with the energy results that they were getting. And this was, to give credit where credit is due in the spirit of Stratus, this was an idea that was put forward by Mosen, and we just figured out that we could use the AmeriCorps data. So Evie pulled that out and combined it with data that we asked her to look for on the county assessor site. and have now created a very large data set actually of over 500 households that one of the next things that Daniel will be looking at is going through and seeing if there isn't some indicator we could find in the housing stock that we could be using to target this program. So,
I mean, I think one of the things, Becky, you brought up was age of house, home. I mean, that could be one potential, when was it constructed? Have they gone through any renovations or like pull the permit data, if there's been renovations made or things like that. Because then you could almost do, outreach geared towards neighborhoods because, I mean, and that's more on a neighborhood scale because neighborhoods tend to come in developments and times, certain ages or times,
Exactly.
What I find is interesting after having bought a house that was single owner, realizing like single owner houses are can be a disaster. The more times that house is flipped, the more likely it is to be updated. It just feels like, that's an anecdote of, observation, and it doesn't hold sway, but man, you're going to look out for those single owner houses that go on the market from now on.
Clearly, it's an evolving program. We're excited to launch it, and we're excited to continue this conversation as it moves forward and figure out how we can keep refining it. So thanks for your support for the project. Were there any other questions for Daniel before we moved on?
Good work. There's a lot to jump into and do.
I guess we can move on to new business. And we have a presentation on flood resilience action, the flood resilience action plan for Coralville by ASTIG Planning.
I was sort of hoping we could keep talking about the energy efficiency program because I have a big apology to issue on this one. I want to be very clear that it is not the fault of ASTIG Planning at all, but in inviting them to this meeting, I gave them the wrong date. So they were planning on coming.
Yeah, it says the 6th, doesn't it?
We just lose our quorum or no? We just lose our quorum?
No, you're still good. We need 5 right now because we're 1 member short.
Because we're short one.
We're short one.
Right.
Okay, keep talking.
So with many apologies to you, and I gave many apologies to V from ASTIG Planning, the slides were included in your agenda packet. What I've suggested is that if you have a chance to read through them, if you have any questions you'd like to pose to V and their team, they can come in and do a presentation either at a future climate action meeting, or as it turns out, Mondays turn out to be really bad for them. So I suggest as an alternative, they might come and meet with the adaptation working group, which may be able to dig in a little deeper as it directly relates. So rather than give them one incorrect date, I have now given them a range of several correct dates to choose from, and we'll keep you posted on that. My apologies.
Can you speak a little bit to kind of purpose in inviting them and hearing about this particular program and be just kind of.
Sure. Well, they had actually reached out to us, having recently completed a flood resilience plan for the city of Coralville. And of course, many of the flood issues that Coralville contends with, we contend with as well. So they offered to share some of their findings. And I think they did extensive community engagement on the project in particular, which was of interest to me to hear what they're hearing from community members and what, folks in Coralville understand about flood risk. That we might learn from and engage with in Iowa City as well. So I think it was an interesting project. I was interested in hearing more. Hopefully you are too, but regardless, they are very interested in sharing it. So,
one of the questions or some of the questions I field when I talk about, the actions we're taking, the climate action plan in Iowa City, is how are we integrating or communicating, working with our surrounding communities? And so I just wondered if, there are certain programs or certain kind of topics, projects, whatever it may be that, we're wanting to do more not just outreach, but like integrated approaches, like the EV Readiness Plan is obviously one way of kind of a different way of doing it, but there's just kind of our immediate neighbors. The Grow Solar program was obviously one that had an impact with our immediate neighbors, but just thinking about, are we being intentional about some of the different things we're thinking about? So, and if there are opportunities that if we could just say, hey, we're in the development on this type of program, would you also, would you be interested in something similar in your community? And, can we share best practices or whatever it may be? Here's what we're thinking about doing, like the rebate programs or things like that.
And, we do have the sustainability working group of Johnson County that meets quarterly. It's sort of a staff working meeting, so it's not publicized the way public meetings are, though it is public. And if anyone's interested, you can come and present at that. And that loops into several of the other towns, the school district, and Stratus, the town's Kirkwood. So there's a little redundancy with this group actually, but
some cross-pollination. But
yeah, there is.
That's the better word.
Yeah, there is. That's a good way to.
Can you all give some sort of indication about where Iowa City fits within, the level and depth of activities of other, I don't know, government?
I can speak on the broader scale, like national, international stage. I'm keyed into kind of the green building industry throughout, and I will say that when we share stories about the climate, what we're doing here in Iowa City, and we hear about what other communities are doing, we are certainly ahead of the ball, it seems like. And even like in the approaches, like sometimes it's completely like staff, like there's no community involvement. It's just very kind of, government directed. Just even the approach of having the commission, and having community members participating in that process. And then sometimes I've also seen like district size scale it happening like within developments or certain areas, districts of a metro area rather than the entire community. So it's kind of all over the board, but I would, from my perspective, from what I've seen, we're certainly ahead of the curve.
Do you think about local governments?
Yeah, I was thinking about, what Becky was saying about sort of Johnson County and Coralville and North Liberty and whatever other levels of government that I'm probably not aware of. Does there seem to be more happening here? Are we the big gorilla? Are we just like a?
You mean within Iowa?
I mean, like within our area.
County, like
the
the
corridor.
same people are on that call from.
Probably Iowa City is doing the most. It has a formal sustainability position. The other towns do not. That's not to say people aren't working hard on things, but it tends to be part of somebody else's position. So on the sustainability working group, the folks from Coralville, they have a focus on stormwater. They still, they'll play ball and be interested in other topics. From North Liberty, we get someone whose position I think is actually called Special Projects, Administration and Special Projects. So it's, it takes a while for most entities to commit to having a position, though at the same time, you want sustainability embedded everywhere, right? You know that. And so it's, I think there's going to be a shift probably in the next year or two. There is a state level program that's being developed to help encourage cities to participate. So the more that do, the more it will probably still make changes within our own county. County, just got a sustainability manager a little over a year ago, making them only the second county to have a position. And Polk County is now just starting things. So I think it will actually make a difference that statewide more will be happening.
Do you think that there's some, we talk about a lot of different topics related to climate action here. Do you think there's some areas that right now, because the constellation of other actors and their capabilities, that lend themselves more towards regional cooperation than others? I know this, it really got me thinking during this transportation planning process that it seemed like it was coordinated, engaged, like each one of these groups, these municipalities have this function that they need to be thinking about. Are there parts of, the kinds of topics we talk about that seem to be better suited for regional cooperation?
Some of them have come before because the Iowa Economic Development Authority has it as part of their objectives. So they then offer, some of the EV discussions arose because of that. So it's a big question and I don't, I mean, it's a great question, but it's also, it's a pretty.
Yeah, I do think that it's probably like, I mean, in people's minds, it's a farther out issue, but north of us, especially like North Liberty and some of these other towns, Swisher and small places that want to grow, they're tapping into groundwater, and those aquifers cannot withstand that level of withdrawal. And so they're going to end up in a situation where they're going to run out of groundwater and they're going to have to switch to surface water systems. And that's where it's going to require inherently more regional cooperation with Iowa City, who has a developed system, and connecting into or figuring out what that looks like, and using the Iowa River perhaps, or other sources of water. And that's something that's it's like, that's going to happen in the next, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 20 years, but depends how fast they grow. And that's one that I see as a big need for regional cooperation that should start now. If you're going to figure this out, the time horizon is really quick when you're thinking about something as challenging as this. And those discussions are not, as I know it, like robust yet. But that's a huge question of like, where's the water going to come from for all the development north of us?
And that may end up being addressed at some way by there's a group called the joint entities, which is the representation from the cities, the county. I'm not sure who else is on it. And they meet quarterly, maybe even more frequently now. And that would potentially, I guess, come before them. If you want to go to more meetings, I'll let you know when those meetings are. So. But I mean, it's also a place, I'm not sure how much time they ever do public comment. They must have public comment, but I'm not sure. But if you wanted to go ask them questions, you probably can.
I mean, on the statewide side, when it comes to some things like some regulation type things, there's while they're not setting it, they're providing feedback input as part of that process. So like building codes, usually that's a process in order for it to get accepted by an authority. And then also, I mean, just general advocacy too, and not necessarily, like having a committee or a plan or something in place, but it's that coordinated effort in some ways, whether it be for legislation, like incentive-based legislation or regulation, or any of that could be coordinated better, I would think.
I can tell you personally, I don't think a day goes by when I don't think, how can I be doing this with someone else so it's not isolated? Or how do I even get started? Because there's already existing programs and you don't want to duplicate. So it's a challenge.
All right, so I guess we have working group updates if people have them to go through really quickly. Matt, I think you're the oh no, yeah, Becky's here too. So I think the buildings working group, if you have any updates for us, you can hear those right now.
It was a pretty short and sweet memo, right? This month.
I can't remember when our next meeting is. I scheduled it, but.
We did want to
and make sure you.
Yeah, we wanted to add.
Did I send it to you? Or?
I believe so, yeah.
I did. Okay. I just feel like I'm a Zoom generating machine.
But I mean, as previously mentioned, that we were talking more about data, like the use of data and what might be helpful with some of the programs that are going on and programs that get developed. So I mean, I think there's more to go on that, as far as which is why we want to get you in on that on that working group, just because that comes up quite often. Yep.
And Becky, I think like Zoom generation, what do you say, being a Zoom generating machine, isn't that like the new hallmark for productivity? It's how many Zooms did you generate in a given week-long period? So the next group is outreach, which is Matt Krieger, John Fraser, and then I don't know who. You're not on the outreach group anymore, Eric, but
Grace is on that one.
Grace Holbrook, and then Madeline Bradley's no longer with the committee. But so I guess Matt, that falls to you. If you have any updates.
Well, per what's in the packet, a lot of it was talking about the Climate Fest, and because our last meeting was actually during that week. So we just gave it a brief update on kind of the activities, events that were happening at that point, and then what was left to come. And And then also about just kind of an update on what equity and adaptation was working on as well, just to see if we wanted to get the outreach group looped into that, because it seemed very appropriate for the activities of that working group as well. And then we talked about just some additional feedback from the marketing presentation, just because that, that's something that we've had on our radar on the outreach working group for quite a while. And so just, now that it's kind of off and running, what are the next steps, and just some general feedback.
Great. I don't know, we talked about equity and adaptation merging or being, coming together. I don't know where that's at, but I don't know if there's an equity update, Eric, or.
Can I ask you a question about outreach? Do you guys ever have discussions about or make a distinction between outreach and engagement and the kinds of things you're discussing?
I mean, I wouldn't say no. I mean, not specifically. We always talk about them in combined sort of way. Yeah. I mean, one of the goals that we've been trying to work through within each of these meetings now is also identifying like specific actions where, we want to like sort of talk through that in more detail, work through whatever challenges there might be with certain actions. I would say that we keep getting diverted to talking about other topics over the last couple of meetings, but that's one of our kind of goals ongoing now, is to provide some focus to specific issues within the plan that, in a more of a problem-solving ideation sort of process. One of the more recent ones was, how do we approach the landlord? The fact that over 50% of our residential stock is rented, not owned, and so how do we make an impact there, knowing that that's a big challenge. So that's just one of the things that we're trying to do as part of the group.
So the equity and adaptation, Eric, I don't know if you have an equity update, otherwise.
So I was not able to make the last meeting because of teaching, but I don't know.
I was there. I can speak to it. Or Megan.
I guess.
I don't think we have an update. Like, we just had whatever was in the agenda packet.
Yeah, the big discussion actually goes back to that business map that we had been talking about earlier. In the conversations with the different business owners, we heard varying levels of engagement with climate action and a lot of questions that could be answered. And it got us to thinking about one of the items called for in the work plan for the phase 2, which we're in now, is creating a green procurement or local procurement program. And those conversations, though not intended to do so, identified some interesting hurdles from the business community's perspective to developing something like that. At the same time, Jane Wilch, our recycling coordinator, has been steadily working on a program designed to assist restaurant owners with identifying better to-go container options. And this grew out of finding out that we couldn't accept clamshells anymore. And we don't want to just be a city that says you can't do that anymore. We want to be a city that's also working, to offer other solutions. So she put out a big survey this summer that I think is it 500 or 800 people responded? It's a lot. She got a lot of responses back. And
survey to who?
A survey to Iowa City residents. It's actually a 2-part process. She wanted to survey the residents first, just to find out like what are their preferences in to-go containers. One of the big findings from it, well, there were 2, which this shouldn't seem like such a surprise, but one of the things people really value when they get takeout is the convenience. And if they have to wash that container before doing something else with it, that eliminates the convenience factor a bit. So there was an overwhelming preference in the quantitative and qualitative questions for compostable containers as a result, because they want something they can still throw away, just throw away in a better way. The other significant finding from that survey was that there is a smaller segment of the community that is open to the idea of reusable containers, like taking their own containers from home to have them filled at the restaurant or fill them themselves. But there are a lot of questions about whether or not that's allowable under current health codes.
Probably not.
So Jane has reached out to the Johnson County Health Department, which confirmed it is allowable. And so I think what is shaping up from that process is maybe a two-pronged engagement strategy, where one is to work with businesses who she'll be surveying next to find out if there's a way we could help with just somehow with compostable containers. And the other is engaging with community members to say, if you want to bring your own containers, you can, just clarifying that and providing some guidance on it. All of which is to say, this was brought up in the adaptation and equity working groups, which have been meeting concurrently and will be at least through December, to say, if we're thinking ahead to some sort of green business initiative, green procurement initiative, containers and to-go containers seem like a good entry point for that discussion. There were some, in our conversations with business owners in the North Side neighborhood and downtown, one of the things we heard that was so interesting is that there are business owners who want to be providing things that come in reduced packaging, but what they're finding is that reduced packaging gets damaged in transit, and then customers don't want to buy it because they think the goods inside are damaged or they think they've been returned. And so they were identifying different hurdles like that. And then when we got to talking to restaurants about to-go containers, it just seems like there's a window of opportunity there that if we're thinking about how to start on better procurement practices, working with compostable containers might be a nice way to go. So I suggested having a meeting with Jane to talk further about the findings and what she hears from the restaurant owners in particular once she conducts that second survey. And then at the same time, the equity and adaptation group suggested looping outreach into this conversation as well, since there's a clear outreach component to it. That was a lengthy update.
When will that meeting be, or is it to be scheduled?
I think it's to be scheduled. The adaptation and equity group, as you may recall, is also currently working with the group, the student group from Iowa State University. And so I suspect the November and December meetings are going to be taken up with updates from that and potentially a rescheduled presentation from ASTIG planning. But that's great because that gives Jane Welch time to conduct that second survey. So maybe it's something we circle back to in January when we can really go at it in a deliberate way.
You mean the whole of the Climate Action Committee that she could, or you all in adaptation and equity will look at?
Well, it's really up to you. I was going to say, as it's now touching on 3 out of our 4 working groups, it might make sense for her just to present to the commission as a whole, and then the individual working groups to take up actionable steps after that presentation. Is that the direction the commission would like to go in?
Yep, that would be super.
Sounds good.
Put that to a vote.
And that's interesting to hear about Johnson County Public Health interpreting that.
Yeah,
those
wow.
containers will be allowed, because about 6 years ago, I actually was in talks with, I think it was Jen at the time, Jen Jordan, and we consulted what we had. I think we even had come up with some messaging, and we were checking with public health, and we were told we could not encourage that. So that's good to know that.
Yeah,
the option that it could be done in a safe and practical way.
that's really surprising to me. I remember going to Starbucks year after year after year, and like I check once a year and seeing if, like they would let you bring in your own cup, and they're like, no, you can't. And then this last coffee day, what was that, like on Wednesday?
You can if it's their container, right?
Huh?
You can if it's their reusable container.
Oh, is that true?
I think it has to be the Starbucks mug.
It used to be like, because I was in Arizona, they were like, no way, it's a health code issue. But anyway, so Wednesday was National Coffee Day, and they said you can get a free cup of coffee if you bring in a reusable container. To see those shifts is pretty interesting.
Well, maybe they're opening up even more.
Not to get too far ahead and not to just ride on your coat completely, but if there's a way it perhaps could be
What's that?
Branded so that it could be used county-wide. So another town could use it, or it could be used in the rural areas and unincorporated areas. I think that would be great. Maybe there's a way you could add Iowa City to part of the logo or the saying or whatever it is, and everyone could use it. Especially for restaurants that might have more than one location. That would probably be useful. And then it would just get the whole of the community informed and connected. I'm just following up on Eric said, we just got to do everything.
It's really interesting. Like this is the one aspect of the pandemic that's been actually causing me low key stress. I hadn't thought about is, eating out and just the waste, the extra waste that are being generated. And so just when I go and, go get something, they're giving me like, especially like styrofoam. It's like, it's turned into like a decision point for me, whether I'm going to go to eat at some place or not. And the places that have compostable, I'm just going back there all the time, even if it's not that was what I want to eat necessarily. Starbucks has been just like,
I've told people that are consistently for years in restaurants when I walk in, they have that. I said, I'm not coming back here because I don't want to, use this material. So you lost me as a customer. And I feel like I'm one person, but enough people say that. That's a point of, and it is for me. I know styrofoam's inert in the landfill. Largely it's not a huge, but it's like, I don't want to use it and I don't want to see it. I won't buy stuff that's like that. And so for them to lose business that does have an impact, I think.
This is actually one of the reasons Jane and the plastics working group that she's put together to work on this issue wanted to do a 2-phase survey, is so that they could find out if this is an inflection point for Iowa City residents. And very clearly the survey results indicated that. Oh. So now when she goes to restaurants, she can begin the conversation by saying, we have heard from residents that what takeout container you use makes a difference. How can we work with you to choose the takeout container that they're going to prefer?
Mm-hmm.
I
wonder if this is something that you could they can engage with Chomp on as well. If that could be something that, if I could sort by packaging on a restaurant or something like that. Just because they have, there's that kind of central co-op, group that is a point of contact and is the takeout kind of driver, literally. On that might be
Yeah, that's actually, Jane has been in conversation with Chomp about it, because Chomp, among the other services they provide for the restaurants participating, is they purchase takeout containers and then provide them through a bulk buy, essentially at a discount to the participating restaurants. And so we had approached them about potentially applying for a climate action grant to see if they didn't want to buy some compostable containers through that. And the timing didn't quite work out for them this year, but Jane's continued to be in conversation with them about that. So it's one potential way forward. It's very interesting. And if you want to, because this discussion has changed over the last 6 years, if you want to thank someone for opening the doors to bringing your own containers to be filled or refilled at a restaurant, you can thank your local brewery. It's really growlers apparently that have changed the nature of the conversation.
Yep.
Alcohol sanitizes everything.
That's right. Well,
the entry level.
Some of those IPAs could probably sanitize.
They're gonna thank them over and over and over again.
That's right. That's right. I have to test that out and see if it works. So I guess Sarah's given some update from. I was not at the last adaptation working group meeting, and so I missed it. And so unless Jesse has a comment, I don't have anything to add there. Unless Sarah, you have anything else from that group? All right, excellent. So I guess, do we have a recap of any actionable items?
I've got 2 noted. One is to look into the estimated repair costs for some of the items that we're looking at for our energy efficiency rebate program. So we'll try to look up that information and get back to you on it. And then the other is to schedule Jane Welch to present to a future commission meeting about the work that's being done on the to-go containers and interacting with restaurants. So fun stuff ahead. Is there any actionable items that I missed on that list?
No, I don't think so. I know Jane Welch is involved in this, right? There's it's because my office staff, Beth and Blake, are presenting on plastics coming up here. So that might be a really fun thing.
Yes, I set up that Zoom.
You set it up. That's the productivity we're talking about.
All your children, huh?
It's probably going to be more sad than happy about what recycling plastics means and portends, but I think it's a good conversation. I think they're both really like at least Beth and Blake are really good on this issue. Jane is, everyone on the call is going to be great. So
1 p.m. Thursday,
Yep.
email me if you need the link to register.
that's great. If you have time, if you're sitting and eating a late lunch. Other than that, a motion to adjourn.
A motion.
Okay, a second.
Second.
Right. We'll adjourn until next meeting. Thank you.